โอ้ไอท็อปถ้าไม่ได้ไอท็อปนี่อยู่ตรงนี้ใช่เฮ้ยโอ้โหไอท็อปคือไม่คือท็อปมันทำมาอยู่แล้วมันกดไว้แล้วบอกว่าอ้าวตกใจกันใช่ไหมโอเคในระหว่างที่เรารอแซมอยู่นะฮะตอนนี้ผมว่าทุกคนก็น่าจะคุยกันไปถึงระดับหนึ่งแล้วใช่ไหมเพื่อให้เราไม่รู้สึกเหงาจนเกินไปเราเล่นเกมอีกดีกว่าใช่เหมือนเดิมฮะโพสต์อิทกับปากกาครับสวัสดีครับเชิญครับตอนนี้งานจบแล้วนะฮะเป็น after party อยู่ไม่ใช่เห็นนะฮะโพสต์อิทกับปากกาครับพร้อมไหมครับทุกคนดูตั้งใจมากเลยเนาะดีครับดีพวกเราอยู่กันแบบนี้แหละฮะโอเคชอบครับชอบ อุ้ยอุ้ยโอเคคราวนี้มันจะสนุกมากให้เราลองวาดรูปเป็นนะวาดรูปเราทำงานบริษัทเทคอยู่แล้วถูกป่ะไม่ใช่เหรอสมมุติว่าใช่แล้วกันโอเคสมมุติว่าใช่มันจะมีของที่เราต้องดูแลอยู่อาจจะเป็นซิสเต็มที่ผ่านการส่งต่อมากันเป็นเวลาหลายทศวรรษหลายชั่วคนเห็นไหมครับแล้ววันที่เราทำงานอยู่อะเราก็ดูแลมันสิ่งที่ผมอยากคือลองวาดรูปว่าซิสเต็มที่เรากำลังทำงานอยู่อะถ้าเป็นเหมือนกับรูปหนึ่งเราจะใช่เป็นภาพหนึ่งภาพมันจะเป็นภาพออกมาหน้าตาเป็นยังไงผมสัญญาว่าไม่ต้องบอกแล้วว่าอยู่ที่ไหนนะไม่ต้องบอกว่าเราทำงานที่ไหนโอเคป่ะให้เราลองวาดรูปเฉยๆว่ามันหน้าตาประมาณเนี้ยโอเคไหมเชิญรูปหน้าตาประมาณนี้เลยโอเคเชิญครับไม่ใช่อาร์คิเทคเจอร์ไดอะแกรมเลยนะเป็นรูปวาดอะเป็นมังกร8 หัวเป็นอะไรดีอะดาวเทียมเป็นตึกที่มีเสาต้นเดียวอะไรอย่างเงี้ยฮะโอเคพี่ลองวาดรูปเนี่ยวาดรูปเนี่ยเป็นเก๋สวัสดีครับคนนี้เขาเป็นเพื่อนที่เบียร์นะฮะเอาลูกค้าอ๋อผมก็เลยว่าชวนว่าเข้ามาทำงานกับเราไม่ใช่โอเควาดรูปครับวาดรูปเมื่อกี้เขาได้เข้าใจโจทย์ไหมฮะเข้าใจไหมโอเควาดรูปครับวาดรูปลองวาดคนเดียวเงียบมันเนี่ยประมาณมังกร8 หัวใช่ลองวาดรูปลองเฮ้ยโอเคpardon a presentation your laptop need to be here but you need to breathe first breathe do you need beer okay water okay it's okay พี่หายใจยังดูแลสปีกเกอร์หน่อยว่าเขาจะเอาแล็ปท็อปเสียบที่ไหนระหว่างนี้เสร็จยังครับเสร็จยังนะยังเหรอโอ้โหนายต้องมีอะไรน่าสนใจแน่ๆเลยวาดยังมันต้องวาดออกมาเป็นรูปให้ได้ใช่นี่เป็นเกมคือเกมเนี้ยผมเรียนมาจากผู้ชายนะฮะชื่อ Microservices ซึ่งเป็นคนเขียนหนังสือชื่อ Working Effectively with Legacy Code ครับนี่เป็นเวิร์กช็อปแรกของการเรียนวันแรกเลยเขาบอกว่า you จะทำให้ System you มันดีได้you ต้อง visualize System ของ you ออกมาให้เป็นรูปที่มันไม่ใช่ Architecture Diagram ให้ได้ก่อนให้เป็นปราสาทเป็นมังกรเป็นอะไรเงี้ยแล้วก็เล่าสตอรี่ผ่านในรูปนี้ให้ได้โอเคนะครับเพราะว่าอะไรรู้ไหมเพราะว่าการที่เราจะทำให้ซิสเต็มมันดีได้คนที่เราจะคุยด้วยไม่ใช่ developer ครับเราต้องไม่ขอตังค์ BU ครับแล้ว BU เขาไม่รู้จักครับว่าไอ้ architecture อะไรพวกคุณหน้าตาเป็นยังไงครับแต่ถ้าคุณเล่าว่ามันเป็นปราสาทที่มันมีทางเข้าและข้างในเป็นอะไรนะเมสที่ไม่มีวันออกมาได้แล้วเข้าไปแล้วในเมสนั้นก็มีมังกรที่สามารถกินคุณได้เลยอะไรอย่างมันจะดูอินมากกว่าโอเคนะเราสามารถขอเขาได้ว่าพี่อยากให้มังกรเหล่านี้มันหายไปจากปราสาทพี่ไหมก็ต้องลงทุนอะไรเงี้ยมันต้องมีเมตาฟอร์ซึ่งเดฟที่เป็นคนแบบเราเนี่ยจะเล่าเรื่องไม่ค่อยเป็นโอเคนะว่ารู้เสร็จอย่างนี้ผมซื้อเวลาให้อยู่นะเสร็จยังครับเสร็จยังสิ้นไม่ออกเห็นไหมพยายามไม่ได้เสร็จแล้วครับให้ถ้าเป็นแบบวิชแบบความฝันคือเดินไปหาเพื่อนที่อยู่โต๊ะอื่นๆแล้วก็ลองเล่าให้เขาฟังว่าเนี่ยไม่ต้องบอกว่ามาจากไหนนะโอเคไหม ผมขอร้องไม่ต้องบอกแล้วว่ามาจากบริษัทไม่ต้องนะผมกำลัง ทำต่อสู้กับสิ่งนี้อยู่พี่โอเคไหมตรงนี้มันเป็นตรงที่มันอันตรายมากตรงนี้มันตรงที่มันรู้สึกดีมากโอเคไหมเชิญครับหาเพื่อนคุยหน่อยโอเคเชิญระหว่างที่เรากำลังรอสปีกเกอร์อยู่โอเคเชิญตรงไหนก็ได้ครับแล้วเราก็เป็นอย่างเงี้ยนั่งอยู่โต๊ะเดิมโอเคเอาไม่เป็นไรเชิญครับเชิญไหนครับโต๊ะอันนี้เห็นไหมเป็นเมสกล่องหนึ่งเฮ้ยชอบครับโอเคโอ้ยดีคุยกันไหนมันคืออะไรกองไฟที่ต้องมีน้ำดับอยู่ดับไฟอยู่โอเคนี่ผมชอบภาพนี้มากใช่อยู่ข้างบนใช่ไหมโอเคไหนครับพี่นิวว่าอะไรฮะดูดีนะครับสวัสดีครับคุณน้อเจาะผมไม่ได้ต้องจากรู้จักคุณฮะผมรู้จักคนที่อยู่ข้างๆน้องชื่ออะไรฮะทำไมคุณไม่เข้ามาเล่นเกมกับเราเก็บตังค์ก่อนนะอะไรนะมีที่โอเคเดี๋ยวเข้ามาโอเคนี่ผมรูปใครครับพี่บาสเหรอครับผมชอบมากเลยฮะดูดีผมชอบแต่ละคนแบบแล้วพรีเซนต์ของออกมาได้โคตรเท่อะเท่มากอะเท่มากโอเคI need like few minutes โอเคทุกคนครับtest โอเคแม่กำลังมันเลยเรียบร้อยแล้วเอามาแปะวันนี้ถ้าเสร็จแล้วทุกคนครับพอแล้วและเข้าใจว่ามันนะโอเคเอามาแปะเอารูปที่ทุกคนเขียนแปะวันนี้โอเคนะแปะโอเคเดี๋ยวผมจะให้ดูว่าความสนุกของเวิร์กช็อปเนี่ยมันคืออะไรโอเคครับนี่สุดยอดมากเราสามารถใช้เมตาฟอร์เมลกับซอฟต์แวร์ได้ด้วยสุดยอดมากครับทุกคนอันนี้ผมโอ้โหมันโคตรเท่เลยนี่ชอบมากมันจะกำลังงอกตัวใหม่มาปะหางขาดบอกมาโอเคเรียบร้อยแล้วครับขอบคุณทุกคนมากเดี๋ยวเอาออกมาครับดีฮะผมว่ามันเป็นการฝึกนะจริงๆเรื่องนี้เป็นสกิลนะครับถ้าเราจะสื่อสารความยากของเราออกไปให้คนที่เขาไม่เข้าใจเรื่องซอฟต์แวร์ให้ฟังจริงๆมันเล่าด้วยภาษาพวกเราไม่ได้มันต้องใช้เป็นภาษาทั่วไปแบบนี้ที่คนอื่นเข้าใจได้ง่ายก็ไปฝึกได้นะครับโอเคคราวนี้ขอบคุณทุกคนมากแล้วก็ตอนนี้ speaker so you here already thank you very much thank you พี่โอครับขอบคุณพี่โอนะครับปรบมือหน่อยครับโอเค the driver โอเคนะครับI think it's time to give stage to Sam Newman
We good
yes ปรบมือหน่อยครับ
I want to say sorry for being late. Who are we blaming for that? Is it? No, it's not your fault. we're trying to think as we should be. Though he drove me here as quickly as he could. It literally took us like 25 minutes to get out of the hotel onto the main road.
Okay.
Nothing was moving, so I'm sorry about that. We're fine.
Okay.
So for those of you who don't know, this is my first ever time in Thailand. I've been here for a few days. I've been having a lovely time. Everyone's been very welcoming. So, this is a weekend. I don't expect people to come out on a weekend. So for those of you who did make the effort to come out, thank you so much indeed. And this is like all about platform. It's a platform meetup, right? So you're all like infrastructure dweebs, people that like Kubernetes and all that kind of stuff. You're like the nerds, aren't you? That's what it is. All right, I'm one of you, right? My background, as though, you know, I'm kind of maybe more known for architecture now. My main interest has been system administration, infrastructure automation. That stuff I get really interested in, right? So it's nice to when I get to go a bit back to my roots. And this talk is all about how we think about creating platforms. And it's really a little bit about a mindset shift, I think, that's sometimes needed in this area. And we'll skip over what I've done. And I really want to talk to you about some pitfalls that I see people fall into when they're creating platforms, and also some concrete tips on how we can make our platforms better. So I'm hoping this is a bit of practical advice, but these are concrete, I think, ideas that we can all put into practice. And so I'm going to speak for maybe, I'm hoping, like about half an hour, and then there'll be some time for some Q&A. And then about, I don't know, you have the story of Cinderella, right? At the end of like Cinderella, at midnight, she turns into a pumpkin. That's what's going to happen to me by about 8 o'clock, because I've been training all day today. So I'll be hanging around a bit to answer some questions afterwards. So we're talking a bit about pitfalls and tips and different ways. Where should I stand if I'm being filmed? Should I stand here? I'll just stay there. I might walk around a little bit. I was on a block screen. Pitfalls and tips and everything else regarding the platform. As I say, I've been with microservices for a long time, and they're a nice idea, right? This sort of distributed systems where we have different teams that can own and run and operate these microservices. It's like some glorious utopia. We're all incredibly productive. We're all working together. We can make decisions about where we want to go live, and it's fantastic. We get this independent deployability, and isn't it great? We can make all these wonderful things happen. And this idea of microservice architecture is kind of useful in the context of helping people go faster, reducing kind of that release coordination effort, cutting down on the meetings, letting people ship software more quickly. And it's a great idea. The problem is often with microservice architecture is you need a lot of help to make these things possible, right? And that's kind of where the platform comes in. I'm going to move over here. And a lot of the effort around that's been happening over the last sort of 10 to 15 years has been about trying to shift work left. That's a general mantra you've probably heard about, shifting work left. So rather than in the old school, I'm nearly 50 years old. I've been developing software for almost 30 years at this point. And I very much remember I would write a bit of code, and then a different team would test that code. And then a different team would then deploy that code. A different team would then support that code. I remember the first few jobs I had, a different team did the bug fixing from the code, and the developers wrote the code, and a different team fixed the bugs. That was great if you were not in the bug fix team. So you could just write code. You didn't have to wait sure it worked. You didn't care because someone else was testing it, right? So I wouldn't bother myself testing my code. Why would I do that? And if there's any bugs, that's for somebody else to deal with, right? Now, we've got away from that model. We understand that that's a bit silly, right? That maybe we should do more things inside the teams ourselves, that we should actually test our code. And for many of you, I'm sure you are deploying your code into production, and you're then sort of supporting that software as well. And that idea of shifting stuff left means we're building concepts into our code from the beginning. We're thinking about security, we're thinking about deployability, we're thinking about observability a little bit earlier in this process. And that's sort of shifting the responsibilities our teams now have. And as part of that, we're thinking differently about organizational structures. There's this really great book called Team Topologies, which I can recommend. The second edition came out a few weeks ago. And this looks at organizations that are structuring themselves around fast flow. So the authors, Matthew Skelton and Manuel Pace, I've known Matthew for at least 20 years at this point. They're actually old DevOps consultants like I was. And so they started looking at the different patterns around how DevOps was being used in different organizations. They used to run a website called DevOps Topologies, which is still out there, which sort of showed these different ways of working. And they went to all these organizations that were now shipping software really fast and really efficiently and said, how are these teams organizing themselves? And so they came up with a few patterns. Like one of their main patterns that's become incredibly popular now is this idea of these things called stream-aligned teams. These are long-lived teams that kind of own their assets here. So focus on a valuable stream of work. This idea that we sort of focus on the idea of product and we have complete control. The idea is sort of pushing us towards much more where the bulk of our developers have a high degree of autonomy. We can implement something, we can roll it out quickly. The challenge with this is there's a lot of busy work involved in shipping software. So we can't expect these teams to do all of that work. So of course, at this point, we bring in a platform, right? Now, hands up here, who's building a platform based on Kubernetes or something similar? Anybody? Put your hands up, right? Some of you are probably using Kubernetes. And when you're trying to pull together a platform out of Kubernetes, this is the thing that greets you, isn't it, right? Doesn't it make the heart sing, right? It feels so good. Look at this horrific thing. They've actually toned this down a little bit. They used to talk a lot about how much money all the companies had made. You can actually still drill into all the stats, and they track how much money these companies have made from acquisitions and all these sorts of things. Quite how you're supposed to piece together a viable platform from this absolute horrific mess, I have no idea. Now, this actually is a sign of success in a way. Kubernetes has proved to be a great starting point to build a platform. Have to recognize that by itself, Kubernetes doesn't give us much. Kubernetes is not developer friendly in any way, shape, or form. And if you think it's developer friendly, then you don't know who developers are, right? Right? It's not. No, I mean, like a developer, you say, okay, just write your pod specification, and you start doing stuff in YAML. That's not going to work. They don't understand that stuff. So we have to create nice experiences for them. And so this talk is kind of about how do we adopt that mindset? Whether using Kubernetes or something else, how do you avoid your beautifully crafted platform becoming something else entirely? I mean, platforms should all be about making lives easier for developers, primarily. Right? That's the thing we often lose sight of. Right? If we're expecting teams to now be more autonomous, and we're expecting teams to now do more things themselves, so they can have that autonomy, so they can move faster, we have to find some way to lighten their burden. We can't expect them to, rack up kit like I used to and do your network cabling and configure the machines and all that other stuff. We've got to reduce that undifferentiated heavy lifting. We've got to reduce what we now refer to as toil. As Matthew Skelton puts it in the book, he didn't say exactly, he says, the goal of the platform is to reduce developer cognitive load, right? We want our developers to be able to focus on the features they're creating, focus on making their end users happy. They shouldn't have to deal with all the busy work around delivery and around development. So how can we reduce toll? So there's a concept that I learned about probably about 20 years ago that I think is really, that I still keep coming back to a lot. And it influenced a lot how I think about platform engineering. It also influenced a lot how I think about being an architect. And it's this word called habitability. And this sort of describes when we think about an architect of the built environment, so someone who designs buildings, they should be thinking about habitability. How do I create a space that is nice to be in, that's nice to work in, that's nice to live in? Now, an architect of a building is thinking about all kinds of things like how much floor space do I have? Is it going to be easy to sell this? Whatever it might be. But they're thinking very much about the experience of living and working in a physical space. That's what good architects of the built environment do. I think the same thing applies to architects who think about designing systems. And I think the same thing applies to building platforms. This is where I first learned about kind of the term of habitability in the context of Toad. It says, habitability is a characteristic of source code that enables programmers coming to the code later to understand its constructions and its intentions and to change it comfortably and confidently. This is kind of nice. I think this is going, from a code point of view, this is really good. Frank Bushman, who was the chief architect for many years at Siemens, talked about the responsibility of architects, that when they make a decision about how they build a system, that they have a duty of care to the people that are going to live in that system, right? And I think that same thing does apply to the platform. So I think if we're the people in charge of designing our platform, we have a duty of care to create environments that make the lives of our fellow developers easier, even though, as we all know, if you look after a platform, developers are the biggest, whiniest babies in the world, right? But they're still our colleagues, and we still got to help them. So speaking of like architecture, and I was sort of inspired by this idea about thinking about the people that build buildings. So this is a guy called Mies van der Rohe, and he pretty much laid down the template for how buildings like this are constructed. So if you've ever been to Chicago, I thoroughly recommend doing the architecture tours on the canal, and they take you through these buildings. That's where the modern skyscraper was pioneered. And this is one of Mies van der Rohe's early buildings. This is the IBM building in Chicago. Now, you wouldn't think this is an amazing pioneering building in architecture because it looks just like a box, right? It doesn't stir the soul, doesn't get you excited. There's nothing aesthetically beautiful about that. But he pioneered this concept of what he called universal space. He sort of recognized that the way we use buildings, we don't necessarily know how that use of that building is going to change and evolve over time. And so he started trying to come up with a design for large-scale buildings like this that allowed them to function, but still gave you flexibility in terms of how that building would be used and changed over its lifetime. So this is kind of the floor plan of what he laid down. And this is what you'll see in this building here, right? What you have is a core, middle of these buildings, and this is your main structural element. And this is where your core services go, recognizing that you can't change your mind around where a lift goes, for example. You can't just suddenly move it. Those things are fixed points around which everything else operates. The floors themselves, there are no walls within these floors that are supporting the floors above them. Structurally, these buildings, largely speaking, it's that central core, and everything else is sort of cantilevered off it. The often skins of these buildings are often not structural. I don't know about this case. But the idea was creating space within our buildings where we could have large open spaces that could be reconfigured, recognizing that the life cycle of a building might be 5, 10, 15, 20, 50 years, 100 years, and we don't know what's coming. So how can we give people as much flexibility around that central core as needed? So yeah, this is the structural element here. But around this can be changed. And that template that he laid down hasn't really changed that much in terms of how these buildings are built. False ceilings, the central core, the lift shaft. But you might come back to this building in 30 years from now and this floor could look completely different. And it's allowed to because the building hasn't imposed limits on you. Before this, lots of buildings we built for a certain purpose and you couldn't remove walls, right? It became difficult. So core services and recognizing that we can't always predict how that space is going to be used. This is stuff that applies equally to an architect of a system that we build, but it also implies the same thing for people who build platforms. We cannot predict how people are going to want to deploy software necessarily, nor should we try to do that. We should think about the things that are unlikely to change, but give people freedom to change and evolve around it. So let's move on to talking about some kind of real world platform pitfalls and tips. So many years ago, I was visited a company. I do research visits from time to time, and I did this. So basically, I go and speak to companies, and I interview people there, just learning about kind of how they do things. And so I did a research visit in the north of England, which looks very much like this, right? It's a cold, inhospitable place full of very nice people. And this was a company that did lots of price comparison websites, basically. And so I was, went out and chatted to the developers, talking to them about, what it was like working there. And I've been invited in by the CIO, who said, "I'd love, we're doing some really cool stuff here, really, really cool stuff. I would like to come and talk to my client, to my employees, my developers." And so I started chatting to the developers about what they're doing, and they're like, "So, what would you like to be changed?" I thought it'd be nice for me to find out what they would like to do, how they'd like the environment they're operating in to improve. And they said, it'd be really great for us if we could use the cloud. Because right now we haven't got the cloud and it's slowing us down a bit. We're having to wait too much. And I spoke to the boss and I said to them, "Hello, boss. So your clients are like, your employees are like, they're saying they would like to use the cloud. They'd like a bit more freedom." And he says, "Oh, no. We've got the cloud. We've got the cloud already." I was quite confused. So I went back to the developers and I said to the developers, "So you've already got the cloud?" And they were confused by this. So I dug a bit deeper. What's going on here? The CIO says we've got the cloud. The developers are like, "We don't have the cloud." And it turned out they did have the cloud. They had Amazon Web Services, which is fine. They sort of had the cloud technically. But if a developer wanted something of the cloud, they didn't know they had the cloud. And the reason was, if they wanted anything, like a computer, a database, they would raise a ticket. So they had to manually type a ticket into Jira, right? And then the operations people would pick up those tickets. This is what the operations people look like. And the operations people would pick up the tickets. They wouldn't talk to developers. Why would you do that? And then they would go to the Amazon console and they'd click some buttons, right? And then they would copy the details of the machine they just spun up and update the Jira ticket so that the developers then had access to a machine. So as far as they were concerned, they would just had a manually provisioned machine. Right? This to me is insane, absolutely insane way to use the cloud. It's like having a sports car and sticking a clamp on it, right? You've paid the money and the expense of the expensive car, but you can't do anything with it. And this is the thing, the cloud is not cheap. If you're going to use the cloud that way, that's a really expensive way to use the cloud. And so this is still something I see in a lot of environments, is not fully embracing this idea of self-service. A platform needs to be self-service. You don't want to put barriers in the way that people enter it. And this, when we mean self-service, it's not just graphical self-service, it's programmatic. Right? We need some ways to automate these things. Right? We want to create environments where we're creating teams that are empowered to get things done, to make a change, to roll that change out. And if we want to empower teams and give them autonomy, we need to give them self-service tools, not ticketing systems. When AWS first came along, a lot of people got fixated on this idea of, you can rent computers by the hour. That wasn't the killer feature. The killer feature was, from the beginning, it was all about self-service. That's the thing that really was the superpower of AWS. It wasn't, we've got a blob store, we've got a queue, we've got a machine. It was, we have removed the barriers to entry for you just provisioning things as and when you need it. It's that self-service element that I still see too many platforms missing. So again, this is another kind of top tip, right? If you want to empower people and help them do their job, you've actually got to trust them. And too many organizations don't trust their own people, which is, and if you don't trust your people, I don't know how you fix that with a platform. Now, back in 2008, 2009, I got involved in helping create the first training courses for AWS. AWS had been starting to get some traction here and there, but they didn't really see the benefit of any training courses around it. Because as far as they were concerned, this was a direct quote, they viewed AWS like a utility. We just sell electricity. It's up to our clients how they then use that electricity. To which myself, my CTO at the time, chatted to them, and my CTO said, "Yeah, but you're selling electricity, but your customers keep getting electrocuted, right? Because your tools aren't that easy to use. Now, at a certain point, they're going to start blaming you because they keep getting electrocuted. So it was off the back of that we ended up creating the first ever training courses AWS had. Basic things like we would take people through signing up for an account, showing them what was possible, and then walking them through how to provision things, how to automate and everything else. AWS now have excellent training materials, not based on our stuff anymore because we only did it for about 3 or 4 years. But there was this idea of like, we've got the cool tech, but you having all the cool technology in the world doesn't help if you don't help people use them. And this is another pitfall I see over and over again when it comes to organizations who create platforms. They create the platforms, but they don't actually help people use them, right? And I think this is partly how we frame what our job is. If we're the team creating the platform, we see our job as we are creating the platform. No, your job is helping people. The platform is the way you happen to help people. So are you going out and training? Are you providing information on how to use these tools? Are you sitting with people as they try and use these tools to see what their experience is like? Because if you're not doing that, you're not doing the full job. You're probably doing less than half the job, right? And this is a kind of, again, a mindset shift. The job of a platform team should not just be about building a platform. That's not actually your job. That's kind of, I'm doing a class at the moment, and we've been talking a bit about the difference between activities and outcome. Building the platform is an activity. What you care about is the outcome. What you want is empowered delivery teams who can ship quality software fast and efficiently. That's the outcome you're working towards if you own it. And it's just how you're going about doing it. Too many organizations, though, that create platform teams see, my job is to look after a Kubernetes cluster. It's like, so what? Who cares, right? Your job should be about enablement. So does your platform team do outreach? Do you go and speak to the developers? Do you track usage of your platform to see how it's being used? Do you provide e-learning facilities? Do you provide training courses on how to do that? If not, well then, why not, right? That should be your job. That should be your job. Because if you don't do all of this, you just become like some other silo. You become something that people have to use and don't really like. So, with that in mind, right? If you were creating a customer, a user-facing product, something that people wanted to use, you hope something people would want to use, you would go out, you'd ask people what they want. You would take their feedback on board, you try and build a product. You then find out, are people using my product? Is it working for them? And you'd constantly tune and tweak and adapt what you are creating to make the lives of your users easier. Any product owner worth their salt will explain how that works. The platform is a product. The users of that platform are internal developers and testers, but it's still a platform. Sorry, it's still a product. So if you aren't doing that outreach, if you aren't speaking to people, you're not treating it like a product. This is still a mess. This is still a mess. And this is often another problem I see with platforms is that we create unstructured mess. We give people too many options sometimes. I've seen a lot of platform organizations where they're basically just providing kind of thin wrappers around cloud environments, and you just got too many choices. Now, it is okay to provide a curated experience on these platforms. I think recognizing the core paths that people are using your platform for and maybe limiting that down. I'll come back to this idea of paved paths earlier, but don't feel like you have to give everybody total freedom. Curating the experience that people have is a good idea. It's a useful idea. Remember, the platform is a thing, right? there's a danger that when you call yourself the platform team, you see your whole world as being in service of the thing. I don't like teams calling themselves platform teams. I don't think it's a good idea. You are not the platform team. It's like if you are the platform team, then my job is looking after the platform. And then you start seeing every single problem as something that the platform itself is going to solve. It's like that old adage, you know, when all you've got is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. Whereas if you frame your team differently, you name them differently, you think differently. That's why I don't like the term platform teams, and I encourage my clients to call them things like the enablement team. Okay, so my job is to enable developers or enable delivery. What's the best way for me to enable delivery? Maybe it's creation of a platform, or maybe it's something else. Think about how you name your teams. That ends up driving the mission. If you are the platform team, my job is to create the platform. No. If your job is the delivery enablement team, then what are all the other ways you could enable your developers to do better work? So I like naming teams based on what I want that team to achieve, rather than an individual thing they do. So delivery support, delivery enablement, variations on this theme I quite like. Because the platform is a means to an end. If you name your team the platform team, you see your past, present, and future in terms of the platform. It also becomes very hard in that context to recognize this platform is not the right thing for you, and maybe we should do something else instead. So, don't call it a platform team. Another problem is governance. So governance is a bit of a prickly issue when it comes to platforms, especially in the larger corporates I work in. Now, governance itself is not an issue. Governance as a concept is a really good idea. So, in a nutshell, governance is deciding on how things should be done and making sure that things are done in the way that you expect. There's a good reason for this. What I see a lot of organizations do, though, is they then see the platform and think, aha, I can now use my platform to enforce governance. I can use my platform to enforce governance. This is another pitfall I see. I don't have to talk to people about why we do things in a certain way. I don't have to engage with them or understand the impacts of my decisions about how to implement governance. I am going to create a platform or a set of tools that restrict what people can do. Why is this a problem? Well, because if your whole approach to applying governance in your organization is we are going to enforce governance via tooling, the next logical conclusion is, well, then everybody has to use the platform, because the platform is how we manage our governance. That's how we make sure that things get done. So therefore, you have to use the platform. And that, for me, is a problem. The moment you make the platform mandatory, it shifts incentives. Right? If you say that everybody has to use the platform, that's not about enabling people. That's about controlling people. Now, an interesting thing starts to happen when you place constraints on people. Who's heard of this term, shadow IT? Right? Happening a lot with AI at the moment. So shadow IT is where you need to solve a problem and you're not given the solution to that yourselves. You go outside of the corporate IT world to provision your own solutions. Lots of people start using ChatGPT, for example, early days on their own personal accounts and paying for it and expensing it back. In the early days of AWS, when they first started going in some of the big companies and trying to pitch them, and their company said, oh, we're never going to use AWS. No one would ever use that. And Werner Vogels, who's the CTO of Apple, he would then pull out a list of all of the people at that company who were expensing AWS on their corporate credit cards. He said, they're already doing this. Internal corporate controls have restricted what they've done. They've gone outside of your world and provisioned their own IT solutions. And a lot of organizations see this as a danger. They see this as the enemy because you've gone outside of our controls. We've gone outside of our world. It is bad. And you see a lot of organizations will punish the use of shadow IT. And that's kind of a problem as well, right? Because if you the use of shadow IT, that means that you make it forbidden. So then if people are using it, they're not going to tell you. And if they don't tell you that they're doing this stuff, then you can't understand there's a gap in what you are offering yourselves. There's something we're not doing, and so people have gone out and found their own workarounds. And because we've punished the use of shadow IT and said you can't do it, people are unaware that it's happening, and so we can't take advantage of that and learn about that. So if you make it hard for people to do their jobs, one or two things are going to happen, right? They're either going to find ways to bypass your controls and do their job anyway, or they're just going to leave. Now, it's kind of interesting for me. It's like, if people are so committed to do their job that they find ways to bypass controls to do their job better, why would you punish those people? They seem pretty committed. Those people really need to be rewarded. They've thought, I want to get my job done so badly, I'm going to fight for your corporate control to find a better way to do it. You need to understand that's happening and recognize it, because they may have found a new way of working that could benefit all of you. But if you create that environment where you must use a platform, you can't use anything else gets punished, you deny yourself the ability to work in new ways or find new cool tools that could be really useful. I think when it comes to governance, a lot of the time it's all stick. We're not explaining the whys we're doing things. I think when you explain we want things done in a certain way and why, you'd often get the right behavior. But in too many environments, it's all about punishment and constraint. What we want to do is say, look, these are the things that we need you to do in this environment, and here's why. And then you want to make those things as easy as possible. There's this metaphor in platform engineering, which is this concept called the paved road. The idea is that there's destinations you want to get to, and we're going to provide paved roads to help you get to those common destinations. The idea being, we've laid down this path for you, and if you follow that path along, you're going to have a pretty nice time. It might be a bit restricted in where it goes. Maybe initially you've only got one or two paved roads. And it may well be as well, though, that, most people are heading in this direction, so we're all going to walk on that same road. But every now and then, someone's going to go, oh, look, I need to go to this other location. The road you've laid down doesn't go where I need it to go. Now, you could say this isn't a paved road, this is a railway track, and you can't go off it. And you're like, but I have to go over there. That's what we need. So just like in a forest, you sort of say, well, actually, look, if you want to go off on your own, you can. But once you go off that paved road, I can't help you as much. And then if you're the owner of the platform, you see, there's enough people walking down this path, this trail they're taking off, they're going into a different direction. There's a new need that's emerged that I didn't know about. Maybe now I need to roll out a new paved road for you. So this idea of the paved road, it's not a constraint. It's not saying you have to. It's about making the common things easy. It's about making the right things easy and guiding people along that line around them. This is a screenshot from a tool called, it's called SysOps, actually. This is from a tool that the Financial Times created internally. And they were trying to improve the quality of their sort of service operations across the organization. And they realized that what they wanted to do was to make the right thing as easy as possible. And so when you basically signed up, you put your service into this system, and then it would give you a checklist of things that they needed you to do. And to say, look, we need you to do these things. And a lot of these processes were automated, so it could automatically check for certain things. Some things needed manual intervention. And so if you went in, you'd have service criticality levels as well. You'd say, okay, my service is like gold, which meant it was kind of 24/7 with a standard SLO about uptime. They would automatically say, well, there's all of these things that we expect to see. And then you could click on each of these items and find out, what is that thing? Why do I need it? Oh, and here's documentation on how I go about doing it. The idea was it was guiding the teams in doing the right thing. So it's a bit of education and enablement. around this time, this is when I get sort of my most controversial tip, and a lot of people don't like this. I kind of think the platform should be optional. Right. And this is controversial because a lot of the time I have this conversation with like CIOs and CTOs who just spent like high 7-figure sums in building out their platform. And I'm like, and they want it used. And I'm like, yeah, but maybe just make it optional. Because this is actually advice that comes from the first edition of the Team Topologies book. If you make the platform optional, then it becomes a real driver for the platform team to make sure that the platform is easy to use and nice to use. Because if you use the platform and you have no choice, then you're going to have loads of users no matter what. You're not going to be as focused on making the platform easy to use or nice to use because anyone can use, because everyone has to use it. The platform is optional. When the platform is optional, you have to work hard. Are we losing the microphone? You were doing this all day for me as well. We'll get someone else in later. So if your platform, is this on? Yeah. So if the platform is optional, you are going to work hard to make it easy to use. You're going to think about onboarding. You're going to think about making sure you continue to offer features that keep people coming back. But the moment you make the platform required, that driver, that incentive vanishes. But by making the platform optional, it also allows for people to use alternative solutions when needed. The idea that you can have a platform that's one size fits all in most organizations doesn't make sense anyway. There are lots of different scenarios where people use things differently. But if you are going to make the platform required, you do need those paved roads. Just remember, they're a paved road and not a railway track. So I've rattled on for enough, so I'm going to just wrap up and then throw the floor open to some questions. So just to summarize, the pitfalls I often still see is not enabling self-service, not helping people use the tools well, and trying to implement governance entirely through tooling. I mean, you want your tooling to match your governance regime, but not to be the only way you go about doing that. And my tips, I'll get these slides shared and circulated. The tips is, well, start from the viewpoint of trusting your people. If you don't trust your people, a platform isn't going to fix that. Treat your platform like a product. It is okay, even if you're providing cloud environments, to give people a curated experience. I think there are 14 different ways to run a container on AWS. You don't need to offer all 14 options to people. Name your team appropriately, because I think, naming things, yes, it's hard, but it does change your mindset. Provide a paved road, and strongly consider making your platform optional, because I think it incentivizes the right behavior. Now, there's a couple of other books, if you want to go a bit deeper into this topic, that I can recommend. Sarah Wells' book, Enabling Microservice Success, goes into some really interesting ideas around how you shift a culture. So if you're looking to use microservices and you're struggling with some of the cultural changes, that's a great book to read. The other book is Platform Engineering by Camille Fournier and Ian Noland. There's lots of really useful ideas in that book as well, if you're not already aware. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So, questions?
Yeah. Is there any questions? ครับ มีคำถามไหมฮะ ถามเยอะนะครับ Okay. Yep.
Hello. Hi, Sam. Thanks for coming today. I have a question, and it might not entirely related to the platform, but it's more about the microservice. So the question is, what do you see or what do you think of in the next 10 years the microservice will look like? Because that now, as let's say 20 years ago, we see a shift more toward from the monolith to a microservice, right? And now today we see a shift in a lot of companies as well that are moving away from doing things entirely in microservice, but towards like modular monolith stuff. So what do you think what will happen in the next 10 years?
So I don't buy that trend, by the way, that organizations are going back to modular monoliths. I think it's this idea that modular monoliths are a new idea. They're a really old idea, like a really old idea. We're talking early 1970s idea. I think what happens is always in the industry is that fashion becomes a thing.
Okay.
People follow the crowd. So I'm old enough to remember a term, nobody got fired for buying IBM, right? So that literally used to be a mantra. Some of the older people in the audience might remember that term. The idea was that everyone else bought IBM software, so you should too. Because if you buy the IBM software and it turned out to be a disaster, it's not your fault because everyone else is doing it. But if you didn't buy IBM software and something went wrong, it was definitely your fault. And I think for a lot of corporate environments, we sort of have been going through that period a little bit with microservices, which is there are lots of organizations that shouldn't be using it. Now, the reason I said that little bit that I don't buy the trend of people going back to modular monoliths is because I don't think most enterprise organizations have the first clue how to build a modular monolithic architecture, right? They don't have the discipline to do it. It does require discipline. With a microservice architecture, it's really painful to change your boundaries. And so therefore, when you create that modular structure, which is what a microservice is a modular structure, it's very difficult to break it because it's painful to do that. Most modular monoliths, though, people don't look after them properly. So I think that trend is a bit overblown because I don't think actually what people are doing is going back to modular monoliths. I think what they're going back to is giant balls of mud. Right. Again, selfishly for me as a consultant, that's great news because I'm going to have business for the next 10 years. What I would like to see, which I think might be more interesting, is that the big selling point for a microservice architecture over a proper modular monolithic architecture is that independent deployability. 5 years ago, I was hopeful that we might start seeing more runtimes that allow for hot swapping of modules. The only real programming language runtime that does that is Erlang, and no one uses Erlang. And that use is dying off, in fact. There was originally some work being done in the JVM around the Jigsaw initiative that was going to see us having true hot swapping. So the idea of the hot swapping of module is I've got a running modular monolith, I've got a new version of a module, and I can basically deploy that new version of the module and have traffic drain over to it. It's actually quite a complex problem. I've lost hope that that's going to happen now. I don't think any of the language vendors care. So I don't think there's a world in which microservices or these style architecture go away. I'm hoping we just get to a more sensible place. I'm not really seeing anything that's changing the game fundamentally around that at the moment. All this whole AI stuff is kind of making everyone run around like they've lost their heads for a bit. That's also going to be fun and interesting. So I'm not actually seeing any technological changes. I mean, we've been doing a class the last couple of days. We've got another third day. So many of the ideas I come back to have come back from the 1960s and 1970s. They're just like, those ideas have they don't die. So like, I think the other problem with a lot of this is that the fundamental challenge of the things we're building, the fundamental challenges of distributed systems are just almost based on the physical properties of the universe. And so there's no technology that's going to magically make that different. People want software. People want more software every year. This drive towards AI writing more code for us isn't going to mean there's less software in the future. It's going to mean there's more. In that world, I think we are going to have to be building more and more distributed systems. So I don't see that trend changing much at the moment. I should be upbeat, shouldn't I? I should be it's going to be better in the future. And what I've basically said is it's just going to be more of the same rubbish. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not right. So I don't see any great changes that are going to shift fundamentally how we think about our architecture necessarily.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I should try and be inspiring, shouldn't I? Sorry. Any other questions?
โอเคดังแล้ว
I like that spaghetti no one can eat. Look, I don't tend to get too cross with people about. So people often end up making quite important decisions without actually spending the time to think it through. We're often expected to have quick answers or simple answers to problems that don't and shouldn't have simple questions to them. So I don't get annoyed when people are just using microservices when they shouldn't be. Again, selfishly, it keeps me in business. But like, what I try and talk people through is to always like step back and think about what it is you're trying to achieve. For me, I often refer to microservices as being like an architecture of last resort, right? They're never my first choice, ever, right? If I'm working with a client and they've got a problem, I'm like, is there anything we can do other than microservices? I think the only thing worse than microservices is a distributed monolith, right? Which is a distributed system that also is a monolithic from a deployment point of view. But I also have a great sympathy for people that are pressured and are time poor, and they've just got things they need to focus on. So, yeah, all I can do is sort of educate. I think half my clients, when they ask me if they should use microservices, I tell them no. Once I've learned more about their context and their environment, some of those clients listen to me, not all of them, right? That's just life. But I do like coming back to, like, if you're going to make a change, if you're going to use a new style of architecture, is to be really honest with yourselves, focused on what it is, what's the outcome you want that architecture to achieve. A lot of people see the architecture as a means to an end, like the platform. They see my job is to create a microservice architecture, and then you measure success on how many microservices you have. I think you should measure success on, are my developers happy? Are my users happy? Is the software fast? Is it stable? Those are things that are important. And then the architecture is how we get there. And also, if we're focusing on the outcome, we might start off with microservices and realize it's a terrible idea, and we do something else instead, and that's fine. But I think too many techies and architects, we get obsessed with the cool and the sexy and the fun, which I understand why, right? That's a driver to want to improve our own skills. But fundamentally, we're creating software in service of the people using the system. And I think we lose sight of that sometimes. But if you aren't going to use microservices, it would be really great if you could buy my book, because I've got a mortgage to pay for and stuff. So it would help me out.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? So I will break with a set of questions that I've asked them to written it down before you came. So there's one interesting questions. What is the hardest moment in your career?
I don't know. It's like getting towards 8 o'clock after I've been on my feet for 12 hours. Hardest moment in my career. Oh, I probably... The one that I remember, I had a nasty outage, and I was working it was my second, I've been in 3 startups, all 3 failed. It's not my fault. I didn't help though. But they all, second startup, and we were doing a system that processed orders, like little small shops wanted to order like products like drinks or sweets or cigarettes. And so we would deliver them the next day. Most of the system ran off as a simple program and a lot of access database stuff, which if you know, you know. And I'd wanted to use a message broker. I hadn't used a message broker before this point. It would be 2003, I think it was. And so I said, let's just use this message broker. It'd be a really good way of collecting the orders. So so we got all these orders, they come in, and at 11 o'clock, we'd close the orders for that day, that morning. And then we had to use that to work out what we needed to order from the wholesalers that arrived that evening. And then the following morning, it all got shipped out. So I'd been in the company probably about 6 months, had about £500,000 worth of orders in the system at this point, and the broker fell over. I hadn't done any proper rigorous load testing, so the broker fell over entirely. And we lost, this was our busiest day, it was Tuesdays, which were Mondays tended to be our busiest day for delivery on Tuesday, people refilling after the weekend. £500,000 worth of orders gone, just gone. And there was that moment of like, you feel this horrible, awful dead weight in the system. And in the way it was worse because everyone around me was being so nice about it. But like, I knew how bad this was.
Okay.
And it was just so scary. I got really lucky. Right, we had these, a while ago, I'd put some debug statements in because we were doing some stuff with the shopping basket. And I'd left some debug statements in. Whenever someone put something in the shopping basket, there was actually a debug message. And there was no matching message, though, to something from the basket. So we knew there was. So it took me a while. It took about an hour. And I was like, what can I do? And we're looking through the logs. And my colleague, Sarabi, she spotted this debug statement. Okay, great. So then what I did, I had to write a little, sed script. So basically use a regular expression, find all these log statements, pull out the IDs and generate matching insert statements. And so I had to recreate all the orders directly in the database and the debug logs.
Okay.
So we did get a few things wrong because some people got things they didn't order because they're taking things out of their basket again. So I recovered it.
Okay.
Just.
Okay.
But that, like, I've never forgotten that fear, ever.
Okay.
Still, and that was over 20 years ago today, and I can still remember how that felt.
Wow. Impressive. Okay. I think this is thank you very much to sharing that experience. I think your challenge is to be here. It is very hard to introduce message broker here in Thailand as well. Even 2026.
Well, I'd do it better now, right? I'd do some freaking tests, and I wouldn't have used that message broker. It was awful.
Okay.
Doesn't exist anymore. It's the JBoss message broker. They killed the product quite quickly.
Okay. Any other questions from from the internet or someone around? Okay. Over there, ครับพี่โจ
I think, so if you're providing like internal tools, I think you need to go out of your way to make it easy for people to use the tools and learn about them. I think the challenge is saying there is going to be a workshop, you need to come to the workshop, is people are always going to find reasons not to go. So the first thing is to say that there are going to be some people that are really willing to learn and some people that aren't. And initially, spend your time with the people that are willing, right? Don't flog, because like, if you've got people in the system in your organization that aren't going to listen, that aren't going to pay attention, don't waste your time on them at the beginning. Focus on everybody that's interested because they will become your own allies. The other thing is like creating new things that people have to do is a problem. So an old colleague of mine came up with this genius idea. So years ago, I worked at Google and our job was helping roll out, getting developers to write tests. And back in, this would have been 2006, 2007, Googlers did not write tests. They literally had everything done manually. If I've got a maths PhD, why do I have to write tests? I know my code works in my brain, right? I literally had those conversations. But an old colleague of mine, before I got there, he join Google, and they'd set up like a little community of practice. Like this is a community of practice, right?
Yeah.
And it was called the testing grouplet. And they were like, how do we encourage people to care more about testing? So how do we reach people that are already open and interested? So they had this sort of mantra, which is put information where people's eyeballs already are. So saying, where are people already looking for information? Where are they already going? Can we put information into those channels? So where are the current touch points in your organization now where people already get information? Can you get like your bosses to mention something in the all hands meetings? Do you have lunch and learns? Can you fold into lunch and learns? Now, thing my colleague Joe came up with was genius. He invented a thing called testing on the toilet. So he thought, where are people's eyeballs? Where are people's eyeballs? Where are they already? Where we put information where the eyeballs are? On the back of toilet doors. So he got the go ahead, and we'd create these simple, quick one-pagers explaining different aspects around testing. And literally every week, there'd be a new one on the back of the toilet door.
Okay.
Right. But I mean, we can't do it now because it's not always going to work for everybody. But the whole idea was, where are people looking? How can we reach people with a small message? But the other idea is it's not transactional. The workshops are transactional. You're in and out. It's constant. You have to just keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going. And what we did was we just kept communicating, and then we tracked usage. And then we try and make it exciting. So we had a thing which was, okay, not enough Googlers are writing tests, so we gamified it. So we said lots of communication about how to do this stuff. And then we started saying there's going to be a month, or there's a week, I think, initially, where we're going to give points to who writes the most tests.
Okay.
We gave around like some iPods and stuff like that. So you've got some people, again, that are quite willing to really go all in. And then we had a competition. We announced winners. So like in your situation, it's like, where are people already looking? How can we reach them? How can we make this fun? How can we reach the people that are already willing? Sort that stuff out first. The people that aren't going to turn up to your workshop, get to them later. They're less important.
Wow, thank you. I think key message is how to make them fun. Yeah.
And, toilets.
Toilet doors.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like AI slop is getting bad enough. I don't want AI slop in my toilet. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. ครับผมโอ้ยดีจังวันนี้ so there's a lot of questions.
But when we build a lot of the product and we don't have enough resource for the platform team, what we're gonna do? For me, I have three choices. First, we scale the team, recruit more member into the team, and escalate the product to some team. Like we build a new team. Hey, please take care of this product. Or like hey, if there anyone want to improve something in this product, do by yourself. What do you think?
So I think if you a product and you have limited resources, then you have to be more limited in what you can expect to achieve. So if you've only got a certain budget, you've only got a certain budget. So I think then it's a case of focusing on the things that you can do well. I think in terms of having other people then saying, okay, if you want to improve the product, you can. The problem I've always got with that model is how. So a lot of people say, okay, we do internal open source, for example. So if you improve the product, you can just send us a pull. Is this working? You can just send us a pull request, for example. Okay, so is a developer that knows nothing about platform engineering going to be able to send me a good pull request? If they send me a pull request, whose job is it to vet that pull request and go through the change? If you really want to commit to internal open source, you need to explain what a good commit looks like. You want to make it easy for people to do their build and test of your platform. You need to make going through those pull requests part of what your team does and is responsible for. The organizations I've seen that do internal open source well, they will be tracking like their mean time to close a pull request as one of their core metrics. It requires work. I think too many organizations think this will be a way of getting some free delivery. So that doesn't happen. So no, it doesn't work unless you're really going to invest. And the problem is around the platform is you're even more risk adverse around incorrect changes, because if someone puts something in that's wrong, I think it becomes difficult. Now, I think what can work is kind of the idea that Amazon always had, which is this idea of primitives. So their concept, early days, their platform, they say what we do is we create lots of primitives and we give you an API that you can use that primitive. You could then, if we don't do something that you want us to do, you could write your own code that you run and that you own that communicates with our APIs. So I think what you can do as a platform team is say, look, we are going to focus on these core things that we do. And these are building blocks. We will give you an API. You can build stuff on top, but you have to run it. You have to manage that stuff yourself, rather than you trying to put code into our platform. And I think that's a safer model. But yeah, I think the vast majority of internal open source initiatives are just absolute rubbish. And it's just like, they don't work unless you really commit. I've worked with organizations that do it very, very well. Google did it well. I've worked with a massive multi-billion-dollar payment company who did an excellent job around that. But like every team, they had like their tracking, pull requests, mean time, making that super, super easy and important. You don't get that for free.
Wow, thank you. Okay. Any other questions? We have like 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah, I think someone wanted to do an interview for me, didn't they? But we'll do 5 minutes and then, yeah, because I need to, at 8 o'clock, I will turn into a pumpkin.
Okay.
5 more minutes of
Okay.
Q&A.
Okay, I will do the last questions anyway. Okay, because before you like be a pumpkin. What excites you these days?
Well, you see, there's always a challenge with recency bias, because what excites me after 2 weeks, I've had 2 months constant travel. So what excites me is never leaving my house again. That really excites me.
Okay.
What excites me? That's a really interesting question. That's a great question. There we go. Look at this. It's almost like you teed us up. This is what I'm currently working on. I'm writing a new book. I love writing. So I still, like for me, writing is what I really enjoy doing. I like sitting down, thinking about how to explain ideas, sharing those ideas, seeing it resonate. So right now I'm working on this new book about building resilient distributed systems. So this is what's exciting me at the moment. I'm halfway through a chapter around like how failovers happen. So I've been loving that whole process of kind of going back through first principles, understanding things like how you tune a timeout, how you make operations idempotent. So what's exciting me now is kind of working on this book and exploring this whole space. It's been really, really cool. So there's an early access version of this book available on O'Reilly.com. You can sign up for a free trial and you can read a lot of it there. But yeah, when I get back home, I'm back on work on this book. Hopefully it's going to come out middle of next year. That's what's exciting me at the moment.
Okay.
That wasn't planned, by the way. It sort of seems like it was. But yeah, that's what makes me excited at the moment, is sitting down at home by myself and writing.
Okay. Thank you very much. Give Sam an applause. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. I mean, I'm only here because, you know, it's Jane's fault, really. But it's been awesome. Everyone's been really lovely and welcoming. The workshop's been really, really fun. So this has been my first chance to come to Thailand. Hopefully not my last. So I just want to say thank you so much.
Next time we will like organize in the right time for you.
That's fine. Okay. That's fine.
Okay.
Hey, just when I'm out, I just want to work hard. That's fine.
Okay.
I can rest when I get home.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Can you just sit here? We're gonna take a photos. Okay.
Can we sit down? Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. มากครับ you